May I speak in the name of the Creator, Redeemer and Sustainer. Amen. If I was to ask you, are you ready? Well, if people asked you this from a safe social distance, of course, you will immediately assume that they're talking about Christmas. Indeed, the shops, at least the ones that have been able to open, have been giving us an opportunity to buy our supplies for Christmas since the end of October. I don't know why I'm surprised, but the day before the second lockdown, I needed to complete some business in town and was a little surprised to see the sheer numbers of people in town. What was noticeable was the queue outside the card shop and people passing us by with Christmas paper poking out of their bags, maybe the odd Christmas tree tucked under their arm. And of course, they were getting their provisions for Christmas before the lockdown. Maybe they couldn't shop online. Not all of us can. So have you bought all your presents, yes? Are you ready for Christmas? Dare I ask that? As clergy, often we have to prepare well in advance. Please do not hate me if I tell you all my presents have been bought and wrapped in advance. This is long years of habit, knowing that December is so busy, there is very little private time to go out and buy gifts. When will you be putting up your Christmas tree? When I saw my first Father Christmas in someone's window, only in this week past. My daughter has decided that she'll put up her decorations and tree early. Not just because my grandson will love it, because I know he will do, but like many other people around the country and even in the world, there is a need to bring some light into this dismal time. Who can blame people for wanting to make it a bit more bright and celebratory? But for Christians, Advent's not just about preparing for our celebration of Christmas. It's a time on reflecting on whether we're ready for the second coming or the end of time. We may be distracted when we're thinking really the end of time is about when the second lockdown will end, or maybe when this pandemic will finish. Those are the things that are pressing on us at the moment. So you could be excused from thinking about the second coming. However, it is something we need to reflect on. In the gospel reading today, Jesus is talking about the end of time, Judgment Day. Christ will come again and judge both the living and the dead, and will decide who can go into heaven and who will not. No second chances, no excuses, no more time left for you to change direction. This is the final judgment. Jesus is not just issuing a warning, but he's also issuing an opportunity for us to focus and find our direction in life. Maybe to bring us back onto course, to reflect on our actions with others. But this is a time-limited offer. Jesus says that all nations will be gathered for this judgment and people will be separated. A clear indication that the gospel is intended for everyone and not just his own people of Israel. He uses the everyday symbol of his time of sheep and goats. Sheep on the right and goats on the left. Those on his right will enter his kingdom, and those on the left will not. So who will be saved? Who will go into heaven? There have been occasions in my ministry over the years when I've been asked by someone in relation to a relative or a loved one who is not a Christian, will they go to heaven? It's a good question. I can only answer that God will make that judgment and not me. In the gospel, Jesus answers this question of who will enter into the kingdom of heaven. Simply put, it is those who have lived with love and compassion at the centre of their lives. He is our King. God, who knows us intimately and knows how we have lived, will make the decision. God is merciful and God is just. We are told in the gospel, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me." And the King, our Christ, will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these, who are members of my family, you did it to me." Love and compassion is at the centre of the gospel message and how Christ wants us to live in relationship with God, with himself, and with each other. This is what we will be judged on at the end of the time. So are you ready? Christ warns us that the end of time could come at any time. With COVID-19, this may seem more of a reality. And I know at the first lockdown, a couple of people did ask me, "Is this judgment day coming now? Is this the end of time?" In summary, Christ says that if you responded to those in need with compassion, love, and without judgment, you would enter his kingdom. Judgment is tricky. We have all have our favourite charities, but I have also experienced a time in the past when working with asylum seekers, the harsh side of people who profess themselves Christians, but judge asylum seekers to be unworthy of their support and love. Remember the gospel. "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you gave me clothing." Christ doesn't distinguish who you do that to, only those in need. While working in Coventry, I experienced a great act of generosity that personified the words of Christ and has inspired me as well as challenged me. There was a wonderful man who attended my church and who was seeking refuge in our country after experiencing violent persecution in his own country of Africa. Members of his own family had died because of this persecution. He came here for refuge. With no money to rent a home of his own, he was sleeping on somebody's floor. He relied on others for food as he had been unable to earn a living because of his status as a refugee and because he had been denied asylum, which we were in the process of appealing at that time. He used to attend our church every week, often dressed in the colourful attire of his country, and brought with him sunshine, light, and hope. God was his refuge and strength in the face of adversity, and he celebrated this every week. One day, my curate complimented him on his colourful shirt. The following week, this refugee brought that same shirt to church that he'd worn the week before. It was washed and ironed, and he presented it to my curate as a gift. He literally gave him the shirt off his back. Such generosity and compassion, even in the face of adversity, is inspiring. On Christmas Day, the day that we celebrate the light of the world being born, this refugee told me that he'd won his appeal and found sanctuary in this wonderful country which he loved. What a day of celebration and hope, Christmas Day. So we are challenged by this story and by the gospel. How generous are you? In these times of financial challenge, have you pulled back from giving to others? Have you looked to other ways of giving to those in need? During these troubled times, the temptation is to look to ourselves and our own needs and put the needs of others on the back burner for another time. However, Jesus reminds us that we cannot and should not put off compassion and love. And I'm not talking just about money. Acts of compassion can be a listening ear, a helping hand, forgiveness, and regular prayerful intercession. I met a lady this week when I was with Philippa, our student, who was driving a community bus. She said to us, "I'm busier than I've ever been delivering, shopping, and sometimes taking some people shopping." I said to her, "Bless you," and I meant it from the heart, for her generosity at this time, her acts of compassion. If you look on Facebook, you will see acts of compassion there where people give or donate the things that they've got for free to others in need. Giving to those in need is important, but also acting with compassion is equally important. It needs to be our driving force. Jesus also talks about tending the sick and visiting those in prison. Now, this might not be something we can personally do, but there's nothing to stop us to support those who can do this, such as volunteers and chaplains and other people. I always remember as a young student, I visited a prison as part of my work experience to become a priest. I shadowed a prison chaplain. When we visited a prison, the atmosphere in the prison was so charged and volatile that it frightened me. I was young, inexperienced, but it frightened me, and I decided prison wasn't a place for me to work in. I admired the chaplain, but it disturbed me so much that I thought I will never visit a prison again. God always has the last laugh. He always challenges us in different ways. So later in life, I found myself struggling with my own fears, knowing that someone I knew was in prison and on remand. It made me confront my fears. It helped me remember that compassion should be at the center of our lives. And so I visited him in prison. I was immediately glad I'd done so, as the person had no visitors. What moved me by this experience was being in the waiting area with the families and young children of those waiting to see their loved ones in prison. It felt to me that the innocent shared the sentence along with the offender. Judgment belongs to God. We need to respond in compassion. We are called to live in love with God through prayer, study, and response. We are called not to judge others, but to be loving, to treat others who we know and do not know in the same way as they would treat us. Christ will come again and judge both the living and the dead, and will decide who can go into heaven and will not. Jesus is issuing a warning and an opportunity to us to find our direction. But this is a time-limited offer. If Christ came today, would you be ready? If not, we still have time to reflect and change direction. Build on those acts of kindness and compassion. Challenge ourselves about making judgments. I would advise you, live in love and compassion. We've seen many acts of kindness all during this time of pandemic. Be inspired and do the same. Say sorry when you get it wrong and work for good and leave judgment to God. Show generosity with those you know and those you don't. This is a wonderful time of year. It may seem a bit dismal to talk about the end of time, but for our ancestors, it was welcomed. The notion of the end of time meant that Christ would rule here on earth, that earth would be like heaven, and heaven would be like earth. It's the end of conflict, of illness, of sorrow, of division. It's a place full of love. So they weren't afraid of it. They embraced the notion of it. We need to embrace that too. God is merciful and understanding of our failings. He wants us to come into his kingdom where he will reign as king. When Christ comes, he will welcome his followers with outstretched arms, with love, as he did on the cross. Amen.